to talk about your health. Living a primal lifestyle.
You know, we have Tom from Tampa on the phone. Hey, Tom. Good morning. It's bright and early now, huh?
Hey, good. How you guys doing, Nico?
Doing great.
Good. Hey, your newsletter's outstanding, man. I'm telling you, man, it is outstanding. And so is the Primal Edge. I love that stuff. I'd never be without it. I mean, I've been on it now 3-4 months, man. I mean, it's just, I can't get over how good I feel.
Primal Edge is, people are raving about it. People who are trying it, they know because you can feel it.
Would not be without it.
Call now, toll free at 1-877-927-6648. Internationally at 727-445-1044. Now your hosts, Nico DeHaan and Paige Clark.
Well, good morning, and I'm Paige Clark, and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced, wild, and natural world.
To recover our natural health and to regain our rights and our freedoms, I'm Nico DeHaan.
And it's beautiful here, 75 degrees. The humidity hasn't really hit us, but we're here to take your questions. You can contact me at paige@tfnn.com.
And Nico at TFNN.com, and we're taking your phone calls at 877-927-6648.
Well, we can hardly keep Nico still because he's on vacation.
I am right now. I'm already in vacation mood. Actually, it's just a 4-day thing, but
to me, that's the perfect vacation.
it is,
you know?
because you get kind of after 4 or 5 days, you kind of long for home and the comforts of home and just being
You're heading
able
to the Keys, right?
Yeah, we're heading to Keys. We're going to stay in Marathon for a few days, head down to Key West, which I haven't been in over 20 years.
Oh, you're going to love it.
I always loved Key West. I used to go all the time.
Rent some bikes and roll around and just have fun.
Oh, yeah. We're going to spend the whole day there. So
You'll be in the water, some beautiful, clean water. However, what we're finding out is that the state of Florida has different plans for our water. According to the Miami Herald article, the state of Florida wants to add more dangerous chemicals to our water. And they're using a little different formula than the EPA is in terms of determining carcinogens in our water. And this is very disturbing.
Well, it's very disturbing because, of course, the last couple of shows we were talking about the water situation with the algae in South Florida on both East and West Coast, and that being the runoff from Lake Okeechobee going into the canals and the rivers because we want or they want the level of the actually, it used to be a swamp lake. It used to be a lake that was draining into the whole Everglades, and then they diked it up because they needed water for the irrigation for mostly, at that time, it was the sugarcane. Now it's for sugarcane and other things too. Of course, sugarcane is not something that in a primal lifestyle we would even use or use it on a very, very small basis for certain reasons. But this, again, is another thing. This has nothing to do with health. Again, it's about economy because our economy depends on these agricultural people being able to do things very inexpensively, so their profit is up.
That's right. It sounds to me like what they're doing is they're changing the measurement rules to instead of solving the problem. And that's concerning because these carcinogens, including benzene, which the Department of Environmental Protection's proposed rule change would allow this to increase by a factor of 3. This rule change would also allow dramatic increases in allowable limits of different chemicals, a toxin that's implicated in the famous Camp Lejeune cancer issue, where U.S. service members developed cancer after drinking the water contaminated with this particular carcinogen. I mean, this is very concerning that we're just letting the rules slide to make up for our big mistakes.
Yeah, and of course, the announcement of doing this was by the Department, the Energy Department, the DEP. And they only put that in their professional magazines as an announcement that this was going to happen. So the public wasn't really aware of this unless you're part of the Environmental Control Agency, because that's the only where it showed up.
Yeah, who reads that stuff, right?
Exactly. And it's also disturbing because, if they didn't do this, that means that the agricultural people will have to get rid of this some other way.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the fluoride.
It's exactly. The solution to the pollution is dilution. Just dilute the pollution because fluoridation is a release of waste products into our water supply with the claim that it somehow or another is good for us, which that's not true. Yeah. And but that takes a lot of pressure off of industry. They don't have to pay.
Right.
They're laughing all the way to the bank
because
they're actually getting our cities to purchase these $1 million systems to administer the fluoride to the water
Right.
and to actually buy the fluoride from
So the
them.
public pays
they
for it.
are laughing.
Yeah, that's the
Although-
fluoride situation.
yeah.
But this situation here is just exactly the same thing. They're pulling the wool over our eyes. They're diluting the product and putting it into our lakes. And this is really a slap in the face because of what's happened with the algae blooms. So we have the algae blooms, and all of a sudden they vote, okay, let's increase the chemicals. We don't have enough algae, and kind of they're saying. We don't care about the public that much, and we really don't care about the economy that much. We care about only the agricultural people. I mean, this is really, it really gets under my skin. And there's
I'm with
nothing,
ya.
and there's really, our hands are tied. What can we do at this point about it? There's not a lot. We can squawk.
Well,
and we need
the
to
more
call
we
it-
start to increase pressure to regulate these chemical companies, because once we allowed chemicalization of our country, that's when we started seeing disease, we started seeing pollution,
Yep.
and something's got to give. And this is a perfect example. But this is how simple it happens. The DEP is utilizing a different model for calculating cancer risk than the methods used by the EPA and every other state in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Every other state in the nation are using a different formula, but Governor Rick Scott's letting this group use a different formula.
Well, they're going to use whatever they need to do to get the thing accomplished so they don't have to pay for this.
Yeah, this.
If we had hazardous waste, we can't dump it on our own property because it's too toxic, probably. So that means we have to go to the dump where we have to pay for it. That's what the agriculture people would have to do, too.
So furthermore, Governor Rick Scott's DEP is accepting the likelihood that more Florida citizens might develop cancer with this new exposure limits using a carcinogenic chemical risk calculation that is 10 times or sometimes 1,000 times higher than the current rules allow. How crazy is that?
This is a very serious public issue.
This is a perfect sign that we really have to make affordable water filtration in our homes. You know, I was real big in fighting that fluoridation thing here in our county, as you know.
That's how we met.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And I kind of felt like the cities we should be able to submit bills to the city for our in-house filtration, because if you're going to poison me, I'm going to charge you to
And the
help me
city
get,
should just send it
help me
right
get
up to
rid of
Rick
it.
Scott.
Yeah, right. Just send it all. Yeah, exactly. Send it all up.
Yeah.
But we're going to be talking. You're going to be learning a lot more about how can we get the most pure water. How can we get water that's not only pure and free of these contaminants, but that actually has a structure for us. Water is very important, folks. We can't ignore these things that are happening to our water, and we have to take responsibility for our own health. And we can't just say, "Oh well, it must be okay because it's coming through my tap." Do not assume that. Do not assume that. So let's let our officials know that we care about our water. And
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing that's happened to our soil. We talk about this often. Our soil is so depleted that the food that we get from it is substandard to what we were really brought up to genetically throughout our existence on planet Earth. And they've slowly been taking this away from us, and this started hundreds of years ago just with overfishing, polluting things, having kings and queens rule the land, and letting the peasants eat the bread and the grains, and while they're eating the meats and the fish. And it's now in our modern society, it looks more equal because we get a chance to vote and stuff, but this is not equal at all.
Yeah, remember, clean water is too important, not just to Florida, but to everyone, and nothing is more precious than our health. And so when dealing with toxic, harmful chemicals, the state's priority should be the people, not industry.
I can remind you folks that we have a live event coming up on the 4th of August, so get ready for that, 6:30 in the evening. It's a 1-hour event.
Get registered. We'll see you there.
Get registered. We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back to the show, folks. I'd like to remind you to pick up some healthy items here. One is health signals, excuse me. Our Health Signals newsletter, which gives you lots of ways to dig into the stuff that we're talking about here. And the other thing, of course, is our Primal Edge. And again,
so you can have that edge on nutrition.
Exactly. And our webinar is coming up. I'm really excited about our webinar, and we're going to really be talking about what you can do besides having great food, besides doing enough exercise.
Yeah, what are some of the keys to great health?
And also, besides the supplementation. I think we need more these days because there's more things happening.
Right, we're dealing with a lot more in our environment.
Yeah.
And this was an interesting article that you shared, Nico, from a Subversity blog spot, and he's really talking a little bit about a sniglet he termed Protox. and what's really going on and how to minimize protox, which is the damage that we can incur from oxidized protein. We already have talked a little bit about, contrary to what you might think, that living a primal lifestyle does not advocate high doses of protein.
It certainly does
we
not.
recommend adequate protein, intelligently spread through your meals so your body can use it, break it down to the amino acids for rebuilding, and not have to store a lot of excess that can become further oxidized. So let's take some time on this article, because I think this was a great
This
find.
is a huge article, and also I want to say, of course, we're talking about low protein intake as far as a primal lifestyle, being between 20, maybe 25%. And there are times when you'll binge on protein, like our ancestors did. This could be a huge meal every 10 days or once a month. It's up to the person to do it, but that also facilitates many different processes in our body that our body needs, that simulates kind of how our ancestors were in the seasons.
I'm really
With scarcity and-
Before we get into this,
Okay.
this is really funny because I've been messing around with a few different formulas for protein consumption, and it's really quite in contrast to what so many people, perhaps even like maybe bodybuilders that are training, are recommending. A gram to a gram and a half of protein for every pound of body weight. That's so excessive.
But remember, they're building huge muscles, much more than...
Right. And I know
they're doing
that
it for cosmetic purposes, not for strength as much as it is how it looks and how they can flex it.
Right.
It's not anything to do with health.
Yeah. Well, there's some different formulas we can use, to get at your ideal protein intake.
Yeah.
But what I will tell you is that most people are eating way over, and it's actually, given the average person, it's probably even perhaps less than half of your body weight, that you need a day.
Well, I have a little formula that I use, and I don't always do this, but this is a nice way that I can assimilate it in my body, and it's kind of self-regulating, which is kind of making a stew. In other words, you'll have protein in the stew, you'll have vegetables in the stew, and you'll have a lot of liquid in the stew.
Right.
And this is what we did last night because we're going on vacation. I didn't want to fix a big meal, so I was watching this program. This is really interesting. The Zimmer guy, which is the guy who eats a lot of different things from different cultures all around the world.
Right.
Andrew Zimmer.
Yes.
Love the guy. And he was in, I think, Bulgaria. And he was at this place, and the grandma was the one that was cooking because
Right.
she was the old one and the wise one.
I love grandma's
and she was
cooking.
combining 3 different stocks, and each one she was putting a little bit in from each one, getting it to the right taste,
Whoa.
and then combining them. And then he says, "Oh, it's the most amazing thing." I go, "Oh boy, I've got stocks. I've got duck stock. I've got pork stock, and I had beef stock made over. The duck stock made 3-4 months ago. The other one made
Keep
a
it in the
couple weeks ago.
freezer.
Keep it in the freezer,
Right.
or even the refrigerator because it's liquid. It's all surrounded nicely. Doesn't oxidize that much. So then I started doing the same thing, and I put it up to it. And I'm telling you, that was just a huge
But
thing.
what you're saying is exactly what we were saying. You're making a stock and a meat and a soup. Supper, remember? That's where the word
exactly.
supper came. Maybe we're supposed to be eating more like that.
I think so, and it's
Big meal during the day and the leftovers and the soup.
and of course the liquid has all that great fat in it that makes you satisfied. So to me, a stew is kind of self-regulating. You don't overeat the protein because you don't need to because the fat's in the liquid.
Exactly.
And then you're getting all the nice nutrients from the greens that are in there. And I think it's one of the best ways to eat. And I know that our ancestors did a lot of this.
I think that's exactly true. And we had that talk. That was when you were on vacation.
Yeah.
Carolyn and I were talking about how dinner came from the word disner, which
Exactly.
was actually the first day. That's the meal that broke the fast.
Yeah.
So that tells you that the break of the fast was not until after. They went out early in the morning while it was still cool.
Well, another
working fields.
thing that many people are saying who are in this primal lifestyle is that our ancestors used to pretty much eat alone in the morning, but in the evening they all got together.
Right, because they were busy. They had work to go do.
Yeah, but work and play, and you work and play, and that would probably mean that whatever was around, you'd grab it. But
Well,
that's interesting. Okay, so let's get back to this article.
So we're talking about ideal protein, and that's something. If you need some help, one of the formulas you can do is take your ideal weight, your ideal weight, your ideal lean body weight, divide it by 15, and that will give you the amount of Meat you should be eating in ounces a day, and that's
Okay.
pretty amazing. That's just an easy thing to remember.
Okay.
That's one of the ones that I like.
So this article really talks about what happens to meat, no matter what you do with it, if you leave it alone and just eat it, or if you store it for a while, or if you're cooking it with all the different methods that we have, there's a different oxidation that takes place. But
And the
all of it creates it.
And oxidation is the creation of free radicals,
Right.
the rusting, so to speak. So we're
But it's
going to talk.
also kind of a pre-digestive thing.
Well, that's why in some ways, actually marinating meats, say in a vinegar or
Right.
marinade, actually helps the meat become
So
pre-digested.
you're using the oxidation along with the fermentation to
Oxidation
create...
and fermentation.
Exactly.
To break it down. But so we're going to spend some time in this article, and really what it is we're, this idea of learning about protox or oxidation of protein. There's plenty of information about the effects of the cooking, storage, and temperature changes, and we're going to give you some tips and short explanations that will help you minimize the amount of this oxidation without having to cut back too drastically. But, as we
another
discussed,
thing-
we need to eat less.
Right. And then the other thing I want to bring up is that, sure, the meat is oxidized, but now, as your body is processing it, what happens in your body to that oxidation? I mean, do we, they say oxidation is the cancer-causing thing.
Well, that's why we want to have the vegetables, because the vegetables are bringing in the antioxidants.
Right.
We want to make sure we're grounding, so we're getting negative electrons.
We want to make sure we have all the right enzymes in our body to
So we can-
combat these things,
Well,
because our body gets a response. It's kind of like the apple cider vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
We take that's acid, to reduce your acid because our body responds to it that way.
because it actually produces an alkaline effect in the body. even
Bingo.
though
So
it's
your
acidic.
oxidation also, through eating really good food, the oxidation that takes place, your body responds by doing really good things with that oxidation.
Right.
So
And-
don't be scared of that oxidation, unless, of course, there's an area there
Well,
where
you
it may
gotta
go
balance it.
overboard. Yeah. you
So
gotta balance
again,
it.
what we're going to share with you here is we're going to go through this work because we think it's kind of interesting. Is that it's not an anti-protein article, but it's an article about treating your protein right. Are you eating? Are you wasting your protein? Or are you having 5 times more than you
Yeah,
need?
so when we return, we're going to really talking about cooking it, frying it, baking it, any kind of heat treatment or storing it, what actually happens to it.
and how the timing does matter,
Yeah.
as I've been saying for some time. So stay tuned to that. So I
And
guess,
please pick up our Primal Edge, our one-shot wonder. If you haven't tried it yet, this is the best time to do it, because on the 4th of August, we have a live webinar, and you need to be on the Primal Edge or on the newsletter. Even one-time subscribers to the Primal Edge can get in on this. So start that process right now, please, and pick up the Health Signals newsletter. We will be right back. The number here is 877-927-6648.
And welcome back. I'm Paige with Nico Dahan, and we're talking about Protox from Subversity.com. He's just explaining to us the damaging health effects of oxidized dietary protein. And so let's talk a little bit about how we need to dive into this a little bit. Nico is talking about how we're cooking our food,
Right.
our protein. Cooking, frying, baking, heat treatments in general. Why you don't have to eat your meat, fish, and dairy raw. Those of you who try to fry your proteins to death and eat their steaks well done are at a higher risk of exposing themselves to exuberant amounts of toxic oxidized proteins than the rare steak connoisseurs. So remember that what's in the rare steak are the enzymes that are inherently come in raw meat to break it down.
And that's the key.
So if you cook your food to death, and again, this is why the benefits of the raw diet. What we really need to do is apply the beautiful things of both diets. You need to eat plenty of raw vegetables, fruits, and animal foods as well. That's how we were designed to.
Well, again, and
digest
the
them.
other side of the story, of course, is that when we started cooking food, we saved a lot of energy. It takes a lot of our body functions and abilities to eat raw vegetables. Raw meat simulates very quickly because the fat is assimilated immediately. Protein is always broken down first of animal protein. Vegetables are the last thing to go, so it's there for a while. So cooking your vegetables is really much more important than cooking your meat. Not on a continuous basis. The raw is really good too, but less raw, I would say. People now have come up with ingenious ways to get that nutrition-packed raw food without the fiber being chewed so much, so they now assimilate it into a blender and use it that way into our little shots,
Right.
which are really, really good for us. We know this. So a modern way of doing it is a little bit better than the primal way of doing it in a sense. Because I think primal in the morning, you'd be chewing on that raw stuff, sure. At night, you'd be cooking it. Because you don't want all that digestion taking place while you're sleeping. So it just makes sense that if we were foraging and we're eating it raw, you got all day to do this, no problem. So that's
Right.
kind of the way I look at it. But the meat, however, is kind of the opposite way.
Yeah, so I think that, really in the ways that we cook our food, we really need to pay attention. There's also, and if I don't bring it up, I want to mention this now, leukocytosis is where we get a stimulation of our white blood cells due to an insult. And we experience high leukocytosis when we eat cooked, stored foods.
Right.
So I hope he's going to get into that because that is another threat to our digestive system. And that's one of the reasons why many people feel tired after a meal because the white blood cells have just had to rush in and say, what's the stuff you're bringing into your body?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why stews are so good, because when you put them into a liquid form, the storage is much better for it. It's not oxidized as much because the meat itself is not being oxidized, just the liquid on top.
Right.
And then when you cook it, same process, and it's much more easily assimilated. You've cooked it
point.
more, and there's much less digestion that has to take place. So what do I want people to understand is that all our food is oxidized at a certain level, and don't be scared of it unless it's really overproduced. And this applies certainly to processed foods. When we process the food like we do in our modern way, we do not ferment it.
That's extremely oxidized fish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No longer are we fermenting and distilling and doing all the processes to actually hold the nutrition in and changing the nutrition to better digest. We're actually letting all that stuff go.
So here's another area that he discusses. Traditional processing methods to increase the storage time, like dry curing and fermentation, in contrast to the effects of heat treatments, the one other common processing methods that are comparably under-researched. There's not really researching what's happening
No,
to
this
the
is just new
oxidation.
stuff.
And he says, hydrolytic degradation of proteins, is an issue. And furthermore, recent studies indicate that meat proteins will also undergo different, often more intense, oxidative reactions during dry curing. Well, I think that kind of makes sense. I think a lot of our dry cured meats that's happening today couldn't possibly be as healthy.
As the old style.
Well, they did salt curing a lot
Right.
more, and I
Exactly.
think that was a much better way to do it.
Yeah.
There's a significant amount of protein carbonyls in dry cured loins and hams, a process of which the researchers show that it was once again linked to the lipid oxidative reactions that occurred during curing.
And this is really telling you the difference between our ancient ancestors' way of dealing with the food and storing it as opposed to our manufacturers these days getting shortcuts.
Yeah. So people like to know, well, what's the different types of cooking to do? Steaming is not really the solution either, according to this author. Unfortunately, detailed comparisons comparing steaming, microwave cooking. Oh, forget that. That's a whole other molecule.
That's dead
smoking,
food,
grilling, frying, and other cooking methods, they're not available. Temperature levels and duration of heat treatments have been the major focus in the literature. And the results indicate that even low temperatures, such as the 100 degrees Celsius of steam, will induce significant damage to meat, poultry, or fish proteins during the 5 to 10 minutes they have to be exposed to this thermal treatment. And that's because even at temperatures only slightly above 60 degrees Celsius, that can cause the oxidative cleavage of the porphyrin ring, which in turn will result in an increased release of hemi-iron, which has been shown to drive both lipid and protein oxidation.
Yeah.
So
what you're saying is the minerals and the vitamins actually leave the food upon extensive cooking, upon different types of storage.
I think what it's saying too is that it causes a release of the iron, and we know iron is oxidative. We rust.
Right.
But iron is.
Well, it's one of the first signs,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. And it's
but
been-
the other chemicals are doing the same thing, all the good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that storage, cooling, freezing, and high pressure and irradiation to reduce bacterial contamination in packaging. And this is what he's talking about here. You already know that cooking proteins have increased these levels of chemicals. But the heat exposure is not the only threat to the protein's integrity. Cutting it, mincing it, and all the other processing steps that food undergo will likewise make significant contribution to the formation of these protein carbonyls and other processes of protein oxidation.
Yes.
So freezing and storing and packaging also has an impact on this oxidation.
Right. So it's just not the cooking, it's just not the frying, it's just not putting your steak on the grill and letting the fat drip on your briquettes and then the chemical reaction there. It's not just that. Just about anything we do oxidizes the meats.
Yeah.
And even the vegetables, really.
As an example, let's talk about eggs,
Yeah.
okay? Because
Yeah,
I'm
that's
a
a real
big
good example.
I'm a big fan of telling people I love eggs, but baby that yolk. When you start to scramble a yolk, what are you doing? You're oxidizing that fat and protein in that beautiful yolk, and the white, for that example.
Sure.
He says, speaking of eggs, the change of the textural and structural quality of egg yolks and whites upon heating is not the only change eggs will undergo when they're heated in temperatures above 70 degrees Celsius, okay? They also have the oxidative formation of disulfide bonds among the egg proteins. That doesn't change the conclusion that, it's a great health impact from the egg, but, again, it's the lack of heat stability of egg proteins. We need to, the more gently and slowly we can cook these, I think it's kind of the take-home point.
The better we treat the food, definitely the better it is for us. And this is really interesting, and we certainly cannot go into the whole thing because this is a huge article. It will appear in a future Health Signals newsletter a couple of issues from now, because I want you to be able to really read this. And then during the next segment, I want to go into the next area talking about this with the digestive process and how our body gets rid of things and keeps things that it wants. And I think that's a really important part.
He's got a cool graph in here that shows the propensity towards food oxidation. That's a kind of a cool graph. Well, you probably never find it, the article. There you go. Circles.
I can find it all.
Yeah, there you go. But kind of gives us an idea that there is a difference in how they oxidize. But
stick around, folks. We're going to get some solutions here on the next segment. And the number here is 877-927-6648. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. So we're talking about oxidation of proteins, and we talked about the fish and the meat and even
what about
vegetables.
whey?
Yeah, and whey is one of those proteins that we highly process.
True, and that's why it's really, you have to question where your whey is coming from. And isolates are really a poor form of whey protein.
Yeah, because what they're taking all the fat out, so you've got it incomplete, and now you have to try to put it back together. It's better in a concentrated form.
But there's fantastic benefits, and actually antioxidant benefits, through cysteine and all these amino acids that are in whey protein. So if you do use a concentrated whey protein that's not or one that's low heated, like Premier Research's peptine. But there's a lot of information what you want to do or not to do, with respect to this protein damage. Since skipping on all protein-containing foods is not really a wise decision, you could resort to only raw meats, fish, and milk. It may or may not be an option for people. Here's some more information. Buy, cook, and eat fresh. It doesn't just take the heat to damage the protein, Nico.
Right.
It's the fact that we're storing it. Even at very low temperatures, this will also induce significant increases in protein oxidation. I mean, just like you cut an apple, it begins to turn brown. It gets oxidized right away.
Exactly. So remember what we said about the vegetables is that the fruits and vegetables, when they start to oxidize, actually release more of those nutrients that you need to combat that oxidation.
And so according to Lee, it makes sense to buy meat, poultry, and fish fresh and to avoid storing and refrigerating them. How many of us, I kind of grew up with doing this weekly grocery shopping where you buy all your meat, you freeze some of it, but then it never tastes the same.
And many cultures do it on almost a daily or
That's
every 2
what
or 3
I'm
days.
saying. Well, let's talk about your Greek or your Italian mama. She goes to the market each day to get the fish or to get the meat. So I think we should be getting more to that kind of a
No doubt
thinking.
about it, because remember what happens if you actually go to a farmer's market. Now you're conversing with people, you're seeing the food fresh, you're buying it, everything's a good feeling. Going to a supermarket isn't the greatest feeling in the world.
Yeah, and another thing it says, this is something to say, quit buying your meat for the week and leaving it sit there. When it starts to oxidize and you see the meat turn brown, you go, it's not really bad for you, but that's a sign that it started oxidizing. And the meat that's stored in your refrigerator is not going to be as healthy or less oxidized as one in an industrialized, refrigerator.
So what the whole genesis of this is really that we have to start out with the greatest possible product to begin with. So if you're doing a fresh meat and fresh vegetables and whatever you're eating, if it's the freshest, if the animals have been eating great, that's only the first step. Now you have to learn to store it the right way, and of course cooking it the right way. But now I want to go into what
Well,
actually...
before this, I want to share this about spices, okay?
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that we season our meats is actually as a counteraction to those antioxidants. So,
Exactly.
I mean, the most powerful antioxidant herb is clove, and turmeric. We've got that wonderful seasoning. So when we do this seasoning, it's not just for taste, it's actually for health benefits. So, that, there are so many spices that you can use that help to stop the formation of AGEs, or advanced glycation end products. These are the spices such as cloves, ground cinnamon, Jamaican allspice, oregano, pumpkin spice, marjoram, thyme. I mean, it goes on and on. Basil, ginger.
Yep.
The healers in your spice cabinet are there to help counteract this oxidation, and so we're going to encourage you to do that. And also, there's some other great tips here, Nico. Did we want to go into the digestion now, or do we want to give these tips right now?
What I want to get across is that first of all, we're picking a great product to begin with.
Right.
Then we're using our ancient knowledge of the spices and preparation and the distilling and all these things that we do to food and drinks to make it more palatable for us.
Right.
Now it's entering our body. But we have to make sure that for the last 20 years or 5 years or however long you've been on a great diet, that our body's ready for whatever it deals with us.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've got the greatest food ever. But even if it's not that great, our body, you have a much better chance if you're already healthy. If you've got an unhealthy body and you're putting these products in there, maybe, because you're overcooking it, might put you over the edge. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is if you're already healthy, your digestive system is working really good, that these processes that are taking place with the meat and the vegetables and the fat are actually getting our body into a state to counteract these things.
Yes, I agree. And I think that
So
the key thing is making sure you have good antioxidants in your body, and to make sure you have good digestive fire so that you can break down and assimilate the foods,
Yeah. So this article here that I have up now in the Telestrator is called Nutrition Intake, Nutrition Storage, Nutrition Oxidation, and Your Body Composition. And this is what I'm talking about. And it's an extensive and very technical article, so we're not going to go into it. But basically, he's saying that digestive efficiency is the key to this whole thing. Clearly, anything you eat has gone through the process of chewing, swallowing, and into your stomach for digestion. There's a bunch of stuff that happens where the nutrients are broken down 1 degree or another, and either they get absorbed, moving into special cells to be released into the bloodstream or lymphatic system, in the case of fats, or not. And the or not is the other thing, is your body has a great ability to take those bad things that are not going to be used and putting them in your poop.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're particularly interested in the digestive process of the different macronutrients, there's some different ways you can look at how you digest fats, carbohydrates, or protein digestion. But what I will tell you is that the digestion of our food is the most crucial thing. If you don't digest your food, you're not going to be healthy.
That's right, and you've got to be healthy to digest, so it's a kind of catch-22
right.
there. You better be healthy to digest these things, to digest them properly, so anything that happens to it, and remember, we're not in the great state anymore. We're not in the pristine, beautiful, primal world anymore. We're in a world that has toxins in them. So you better be even healthier than when you were years ago. You have to be healthier today than you were 100 years ago.
Well, let's talk about what you said. You brought it up, nutrient efficiency in your poop. Folks, this is really a clue. This is where, a lot of the absorption is happening, and so let's maybe give people a little idea of how things happen. If you don't absorb your nutrients in the stomach and they move further down, the stomach is really the prep phase.
Yeah.
That's where we're disinfecting it and we're breaking it down.
Right.
We're preparing it for the next stage.
Right.
In some cases, this is why fiber and everything keeps things moving along.
But remember, the fat is absorbed in the small intestines immediately for energy. So
that's where all the small intestines and everything is where we're taking the nutrients and we're utilizing them. But nutrients that pass this stage eventually come out the other end in your poop, and we needn't talk about that much more. So if we're not absorbing them, that's where they're going to end up.
Right. But you can have real toxic poop too going through that digestive system. That isn't good for you either. Mm-hmm. So your body has to deal with all this stuff.
What's the worst thing is if we're not able to process things, then we reabsorb them, because the lower bowel or your colon is where we reabsorb. If you're dehydrated, you're going to reabsorb the moisture from from the waste, and that moisture may in fact have toxins, and then you're reabsorbing them instead of eliminating them. So that's why staying hydrated makes sure that you eliminate potential toxins and the foods that you digest and the foods that you don't.
And that's why you need regular bowel movements. You want that stuff moving through nice and fast, especially through the colon. You know, that is what gives you the health, is how that body works. So if you're eating these American sad diet, if you're eating fast food, you can see how your body is being distressed just by digesting it. And then in the colon, now you're releasing even more toxins that can't get rid of it fast enough. You may be bloated. There may be a lot of things happening in there, but it's being retained a lot longer, and it's a lot worse than it was if you're eating the right things. So anyway, we got one more short segment.
So we'll be right back.
Yep.
So researchers have finally discovered the key to naturally stripping sugar from all of our foods. Now, that's an interesting thing.
Well, it's an interesting thing in two ways. I have a kind of mixed feeling about this, naturally getting the sugar out of the food. And why did they put the sugar in there? To mask the bitterness of some of the foods that we have found not as palatable as we used to.
Well, our favorite taste sensation is sweet.
Yeah.
And yet we're supposed to have hot, you know, sweet, bitter, sour, all pungent, all of these different flavor sensations, but we prefer. So chocolate, which is an extremely healthy food, has a sort of a little bit of a bitter kick to it.
Certainly does, unless you put milk in it and sugar in it.
Right.
And they definitely do that. So now they've come up with an enzyme, actually from a mushroom, that will actually mask the bitter taste. So this allows them to take the sugar out, which would be good. But I contend that the natural bitter flavors teaches us body responses that is essential for our health.
Listen to this. Mycotechnology seeks to answer a problem that has dogged food scientists for the last 3 decades, which is how to maintain a product's taste while cutting back on sugar. Sounds good. The science behind its approach might be complex, but the concept is strikingly simple. By deploying invisible fungi molecules to camp out on a person's taste buds while they chew the food, the company has found a way to block naturally occurring bitter flavors that food companies have long been determined to mask. They've been dependent on sugar.
Well,
to mask
remember,
it.
they're trying to mask foods that aren't really foods, like breakfast cereals and things that are manufactured. They put chocolate on here, and that's not really what they're talking about as much.
Yeah, they call it. They say they created a bitter blocker.
Yeah, a bitter blocker.
But this could be good, folks, because perhaps.
It's a two-edged sword. As far as I'm
two-edged
concerned.
sword. Yeah, no, I agree. But it could be good. I mean, again, perhaps maybe people would eat more dark chocolate, which is very healthful. It's a superfood, food of the gods.
But I
so to
think
speak.
it'd be better for the people to get a bitter palate, like we had in the old days, because in nature there's not a lot of sweet stuff. No wonder we were drawn to it, because it probably saved our life if we come up to a honeycomb and we hadn't eaten it for a while.
Well, there's so much. There's honey has major amino acids. It's really great bodybuilding.
But it's not prevalent.
Food.
I mean, it's not something that you run across every day.
No, it was like a treat. It was
Exactly.
they probably had a ceremony when they found
so we
it.
had a bitter palate.
Yeah,
That's
we were supposed to have.
Yeah, if you're going to eat raw vegetables and stuff and go into the woods and get this stuff, that's bitter, man, and you better like it. Because
and actually, this could be real concerning, because as we, perhaps overeat the foods. Because
well, they're going to have crap food and use the blockers. It's not going. It's going to taste good. Don't worry about it.
So listen to this. Mycotechnology has a deal with GLG Life Tech, one of the biggest publicly traded producers of stevia, a zero-calorie sweetener that's been embraced by Coca-Cola. Well, good for Coke. They're getting the high-fructose corn syrup out of it. Stevia has a bitter aftertaste, so GLG Life Tech turned to Mycotechnology to block that flavor. It's a business relationship that grew in importance in June.
So all we're doing is we're masking the thing again, and what we're going to have is a product or products that is called food that isn't nutrition, but we're going to pretend there's nutrition, and we're going to have you be fooled that there's nutrition in there, and then you can eat it. And then you're going to be hungry.
They're going to use this. Could be used for the good, but the food industry will use it for the bad.
Of course they are, because they want to sell more. The product has to sell more. The company has to do better and better and better and better. It can't be complacent.
Well, and it's also about eating more food, and that's what we found out. That's the flavor additives. We are designed to eat more foods. We weren't really designed to eat 3, 4, 6 meals a day.
Right. When you say more food, you're not talking quantity. You're talking the quantity of different types.
Yeah, we want to eat more variety, diet variation
exactly.
as opposed, So that's the.
Well, that's pretty much the show. I know we covered a lot of detail. Again, some of these links will be in there coming up, and you can do some of your own research just by...
Make sure you join us. Get registered for the webinar so you can be part of some cutting-edge information we're going to share.
August 4th at 6:30, and we're going to have fun. It's going to be an hour or more long, and pick up your Primal Edge and your newsletter, and you can attend this.
Stay
Very
healthy.
important. Thanks a lot, folks.
Optimal health, peak performance.
I'll be thinking of you while I'm down in the Keys.
Yeah, have fun.
You're watching Tiger TV.